Genesis. By Lenin Dev. A thriller of science, faith, and betrayal in the heart of Paris. Copyright 2025 by Lenin Dev. All rights reserved. This book is a work of fiction. All characters, events, and locations are products of the author's imagination, except where otherwise noted. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. No part of this book may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews or articles. For permissions or inquiries, please contact lenindev@aol.com. Disclaimer. The events, characters, and dialogues in this book are a product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, or persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The author does not claim to have provided a factual account of historical or scientific events. This work is a work of fiction and intended to entertain and provoke thought, not to serve as an authoritative source on the subjects discussed. The book discusses scientific, philosophical, and religious themes, which should be considered from a speculative and creative perspective. While some of the information presented may reflect real theories, they are portrayed in a fictional context and do not intend to endorse any specific belief system. Acknowledgements. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the people whose support, encouragement, and inspiration made the creation of Genesis possible. First and foremost, to my family, whose unwavering love and understanding provided me with the strength to pursue this journey, even during its most challenging moments. Their belief in me has been a constant source of motivation. I am also profoundly grateful to my dearest friend, Duty, whose belief in my creative vision has always been a guiding light. Their support has reminded me to push boundaries and explore new possibilities in both my personal and professional life. To the experts, scholars, and researchers who generously shared their knowledge and insights, I extend my heartfelt thanks. Their expertise and dedication to their fields helped me shape the ideas and themes explored within these pages. Without their contributions, this book would not have been possible. I would like to acknowledge Elon Musk and Sam Altman, whose groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence continues to inspire the exploration of human potential and the questions that lie beyond our current understanding. Their vision has been a catalyst for the themes explored in Genesis. Finally, to the many unnamed souls, those whose work in science, philosophy, and history have illuminated paths and sparked ideas, thank you for unknowingly shaping the narrative of this book. Your influence is woven into its very fabric. Above all, I wish to express my gratitude to the readers who have chosen to embark on this journey of imagination, transformation, and discovery with me. Your willingness to dive into a world of intrigue, mystery, and thought-provoking questions is the true essence of storytelling. This book exists for you. Contents. Prologue: The Prophecy of Science. Chapter 1: The Louvre Gala. Chapter 2: The Voice of Orpheus. Chapter 3: The Assassination. Chapter 4: The Escape. Chapter 5: The Hidden Man. Chapter 6: The Last King of Pop. Chapter 7: The Shadow of the Church. Chapter 8: The Catacombs Chase. Chapter 9: The Sacré-Cœur Cipher. Chapter 10: The Assassin's Confession. Chapter 11: The Hunt for the Password. Chapter 12: The Chase on the Seine. Chapter 13: The Royal Betrayal. Chapter 14: The Hidden Library. Chapter 15: The Valley of the Fallen. Chapter 16: The Final Password. Chapter 17: The Quantum Cube. Chapter 18: The Revelation Begins. Chapter 19: The New Genesis. Chapter 20: The Future of Humanity. Chapter 21: The Global Uprising. Chapter 22: The AI's True Identity. Chapter 23: The Mastermind Revealed. Chapter 24: The Last Assassin. Chapter 25, The AI's Final Move. Chapter 26, The Death of a King. Chapter 27, The Last Meeting. Chapter 28, The Last Symbol. Chapter 29, A World Divided. Chapter 30, The Dawn of a New Era. Epilogue, The End of an Age. Prologue, The Prophecy of Science. The Notre Dame Cathedral stood as an enduring symbol of history, faith, and the relentless passage of time. Its towering spires, draped in the gentle luminescence of the Parisian night, rose like silent sentinels, piercing the darkness with an air of solemn grandeur. The moon, a distant observer in the celestial expanse, cast its silvery glow upon the Gothic architecture, illuminating the intricate carvings and gargoyles that adorned the ancient stonework. The cobbled streets below lay in hushed reverence, bearing witness to countless souls who had walked these paths for centuries, their footsteps etched into the annals of time. Inside the cathedral, the air was thick with an atmosphere of sanctity and mystery. The scent of aged stone mingled with the lingering traces of incense, weaving an invisible tapestry of devotion that had endured through the ages. Stained glass windows, illuminated from within by the dim flicker of candlelight, told stories of saints and martyrs, their silent gazes watching over the sacred space with an omnipresent wisdom. It was within these hallowed walls, beneath the gaze of angels frozen in time, that a clandestine meeting was about to take place, one that would alter the course of human history. In the vast emptiness of the grand hall, a lone figure stood at the altar, his silhouette elongated by the flickering candlelight that cast restless shadows across the marble floor. Elias Moreau, a man whose name had become synonymous with genius and ambition, exuded an air of quiet intensity. His tall frame, draped in a tailored suit that spoke of both sophistication and purpose, reflected the duality of his existence. A scientist who straddled the fine line between reverence for the past and an unyielding hunger for the future. His gaze, dark and penetrating, was fixed upon the vast emptiness of the cathedral, as if searching for answers within its sacred depths. Moreau was no ordinary scientist. A visionary to some, a heretic to others, he had devoted his life to unraveling the mysteries of existence. As the founder of Gentech Industries, his work had propelled humanity into new frontiers of biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and the fundamental understanding of life itself. But beyond his celebrated achievements lay an obsession, one that had driven him to the precipice of discovery, where science and faith clashed in an unforgiving battle for truth. He had uncovered something extraordinary, something that would shake the very foundation of human belief. And now, he was ready to share it with the world. The distant echo of footsteps disrupted the silence, drawing Moreau's attention to the grand entrance of the cathedral. He turned, his expression unreadable, as three figures emerged from the shadows, their presence marking the gravity of the moment. They had come not as mere men, but as emissaries of faith, representing centuries of doctrine, tradition, and belief. Cardinal Antoine Renaud was the first to step forward, his crimson robes flowing with each measured stride. The highest-ranking member of the French clergy, his face bore the weight of wisdom and authority, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Beside him walked Rabbi Samuel Levy, an elder whose every movement carried an air of quiet dignity. His dark eyes, keen and knowing, observed Moreau with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The final figure, Grand Imam Omar al-Farouk, moved with deliberate grace, his black robes a stark contrast against the cold marble beneath his feet. His expression remained impassive, yet his very presence radiated a silent power. The three men approached the altar, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the candles that flickered atop the towering stone columns. They had come not as adversaries, nor as allies, but as seekers of truth, though each carried the weight of the institutions they represented. Moreau knew that their agreement to meet with him had not been driven by mere curiosity. They feared what he had uncovered, feared that his revelation would unravel the very fabric of human belief. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice," Moreau began, his voice smooth yet edged with an intensity that hinted at the gravity of his message. His gaze swept over the three men, noting the tension that lingered in the air like an unspoken challenge. Cardinal Renaud's voice was low and measured as he responded. You know why we are here, Elias. Your work has garnered both admiration and skepticism, but what you claim now is different. It threatens the very foundations upon which faith is built. Moreau inclined his head, his expression betraying neither arrogance nor doubt. I understand your concerns, Cardinal. But you must realize, I have dedicated my life to this research. My findings are not born of malice, nor do they seek to dismantle faith. They are simply the truth. And the truth, no matter how inconvenient, must be revealed. Rabbi Levi leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. Truth, Elias? That is a dangerous word. You speak of the origins of life, of the very essence of existence. Are you claiming to have found a scientific explanation that negates the divine? Moreau met his gaze without hesitation. Yes. I have uncovered irrefutable evidence that life on this planet, and by extension the universe itself, emerged not by divine will, but through a sequence of natural processes. Chemical reactions, energy interactions, an intricate dance of matter and time. We can now not only understand it, but replicate it. The implications are beyond anything humanity has ever known. A heavy silence settled over the chamber, the weight of Moreau's words pressing upon those who stood before him. For a moment, there was only the distant flickering of candles, the soft rustle of fabric as the religious leaders exchanged uneasy glances. It was Cardinal Renaud who finally broke the silence, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Do you grasp the magnitude of what you are saying? If your claim holds true, then everything we have ever believed is a lie. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, the very foundations of human faith would crumble. What then will be left for those who have found solace in belief? Rabbi Levi's face had paled, his fingers tightening around the edges of his robe. You speak of an intellectual revolution, Elias. But revolutions come with consequences. If you release this discovery to the world, you will not only challenge institutions, you will shatter the very fabric of human society. Faith is not merely doctrine, it is purpose, it is identity. What will remain if you take that away? Grand Imam Al-Farouq's voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of prophecy. You cannot fathom the storm you will unleash. The world is not ready for this knowledge. You will divide nations, families, generations. Faith is not just belief, it is the thread that binds civilization together. You would unravel it with a single truth? Moreau's jaw tightened, his resolve unwavering. I understand your fears. But knowledge cannot be silenced, nor should it be. This discovery is not meant to destroy, it is meant to build anew. A world where humanity's understanding is rooted in science, in reason. We stand at the precipice of a new era. Cardinal Renaud's expression hardened. And when you step forward, Elias, you will make an enemy of every faith on this planet. You will stand alone. And you will be hunted. Moreau's voice was steady. I have considered the consequences. And I will not let fear stand in the way of the truth. He turned, his footsteps echoing as he strode toward the cathedral's grand entrance. Outside, the night air was sharp against his skin. He reached into his pocket, retrieving his phone as it vibrated with an incoming message. His breath hitched as he read the words. You will not live to see your revolution. A warning. A promise. A shadow that had already begun to move against him. As he glanced back at the towering cathedral, its darkened spires seemed to whisper of the battles yet to come. His revolution had begun, but the war for truth had only just awakened. Chapter 1: The Louvre Gala. The Louvre Museum, with its iconic glass pyramid gleaming beneath the Parisian night sky, stood as an eternal testament to human creativity, intellect, and artistic grandeur. Its vast halls had witnessed centuries of history, housing masterpieces that spoke of civilizations long gone and stories still whispered by the walls. But tonight, the Louvre was more than just a sanctuary for art. It was the epicenter of an intellectual revolution. Inside its grand corridors, an air of anticipation hummed through the space like an electric current. France's most elite minds, scientists, philosophers, artists, and scholars, mingled with royalty, celebrities, and dignitaries. Waiters, clad in crisp black and white, weaved through the crowd, offering flutes of the finest champagne. The night carried the scent of luxury, expensive perfumes mingling with the delicate aroma of aged wine and polished marble. Yet beyond the extravagance of the evening, a sense of mystery loomed, tethering each guest to the unspoken promise that this was no ordinary gala. The invitations had been exclusive, their wording cryptic. No elaborate embellishments or customary pleasantries adorned them. Instead, they bore a single line: "A revolution is coming. Witness the dawn of a new era." No one knew exactly what awaited them, but the intrigue was irresistible. At the heart of it all stood Elias Moreau, the enigmatic host of the evening. A man in his mid-40s, his sharp, calculating gaze swept across the room as he silently observed the gathering. Dressed impeccably in a tailored black tuxedo, he exuded a quiet confidence, a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He was not just a billionaire scientist, he was a man of ambition, a mind unshackled by convention. Tonight he would unveil a discovery that, in his own words, would redefine existence itself. The world had always teetered between science and faith, a delicate balance of logic and belief. But Moreau was prepared to disrupt that equilibrium. He had spent years in the shadows, pushing the boundaries of knowledge, unlocking secrets long thought unattainable. Now he was ready to share his findings with the world, whether the world was ready or not. Among the distinguished guests, two individuals stood apart, both destined to play pivotal roles in the night's unfolding drama. Professor Adrien Vasseur, a renowned symbologist and an expert in religious texts, surveyed the room with a scrutinizing eye. Tall and lean, his silver-rimmed glasses framed an angular face lined with years of contemplation. His life had been devoted to studying the crossroads of faith and reason, deciphering the symbols that had shaped human belief for millennia. But tonight, his scholarly instincts told him that something was amiss. Moreau's proclamation was not just about science, it was about challenging the fundamental beliefs that billions clung to. Nearby, Celeste Durand, the Louvre's curator, stood with an effortless grace that masked the tempest within her. Her raven black hair cascaded over her shoulders, complementing the deep emerald of her evening gown. She was no stranger to Moreau. They had shared a friendship forged in intellectual admiration, though time had frayed the edges of their once close bond. She had always respected his brilliance, but his relentless pursuit of truth at any cost unnerved her. Tonight, standing amidst the echoes of history, she could not shake the feeling that Moreau was on the precipice of something irreversible. At her side, Prince Alexander, heir to the French throne, cast an unreadable glance toward her. Tall, regal, and burdened by duty, he bore his lineage with a quiet melancholy. For nearly 2 years, he and Celeste had been engaged, a union of convenience rather than passion. He admired her intellect, her independence, but the weight of expectation had always stood between them. Yet tonight, it was not their engagement that occupied his thoughts. It was Moreau. The prince had attended this gala, not out of personal curiosity, but as a political obligation. If Moreau's discovery was as groundbreaking as he claimed, it could have consequences beyond the realm of science. It could shake the very foundation of the monarchy, of faith, of order itself. The night deepened, and the murmurs of speculation grew as Moreau finally stepped onto the elevated platform at the center of the hall. The conversations quieted, all eyes turning toward him. The anticipation was tangible, the room poised on the edge of revelation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Moreau began, his voice smooth yet charged with the weight of what was to come. "Tonight we gather not just to celebrate knowledge, but to redefine it. For centuries mankind has sought answers to the most profound questions. Where do we come from? What is the meaning of our existence? And perhaps most importantly, what does our future hold?" A ripple of intrigue passed through the audience. Moreau's reputation preceded him. He was not a man prone to hyperbole, which made his words all the more unsettling. "I have dedicated my life to the pursuit of truth," he continued. "And through years of relentless research, I have arrived at a singular conclusion, one that will challenge everything we have ever believed." Silence gripped the room. Even the waiters had ceased their movement, their trays suspended midair, as if the very atmosphere demanded stillness. The origins of life are not divine. They are not mystical. They are purely scientific. I have uncovered irrefutable evidence that life, in its entirety, is governed by the immutable laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. The creation myths of our ancestors, the doctrines that have shaped civilizations, are merely that. Myths. A murmur of disbelief swept through the crowd. Some gasped audibly, while others exchanged hurried whispers. A few looked enthralled, while others appeared deeply unsettled. From the back of the room, a figure moved forward with deliberate steps. Cardinal Renaud, a towering man draped in the crimson robes of the church, fixed Moreau with an unwavering stare. His presence alone commanded deference. When he spoke, his voice was deep, steady, yet charged with an underlying warning. "You must stop this, Elias," the cardinal intoned. "There are things beyond human comprehension, truths that should not be unraveled. What you propose to reveal will tear apart the very fabric of faith." Moreau met Renaud's gaze with a quiet, unshakable defiance. "Faith has had its time," he replied. "Now it is time for truth." A charged silence stretched between them. In that moment, the room became a battlefield, science on one side, faith on the other. Vasseur watched with a growing sense of unease. He had long debated the coexistence of science and religion, but Moreau was not interested in balance. He was interested in conquest. "I will reveal everything in 3 days," Moreau declared, his voice carrying through the hall like a prophecy. "And when I do, the world will never be the same." The reaction was instant. Some applauded, eager to witness history unfold. Others whispered anxiously, fearing the storm that was about to be unleashed. Celeste exhaled, a deep unease settling in her chest. She knew Moreau well enough to understand that there was no turning back now. The Louvre had seen the rise and fall of kings, the birth and death of revolutions. Tonight it had borne witness to something just as seismic, the first tremor of an upheaval that would shake humanity to its core. Outside, the city of Paris stretched beneath the night sky, its lights flickering like distant stars. Yet amid the beauty there was a sense of foreboding, a quiet warning carried by the wind. The world, though unaware, stood on the precipice of an unprecedented reckoning. And Elias Moreau had just struck the first match. Chapter 2: The Voice of Orpheus. The grand ballroom of the Louvre Museum had been transformed into a scene of almost ethereal beauty. The golden chandeliers, adorned with 1,000 twinkling lights, cast a warm glow upon the polished marble floors, reflecting the elegance and grandeur of the evening. Soft strains of classical music floated through the air, weaving seamlessly with the murmur of sophisticated conversations and the occasional burst of laughter. Tonight was no ordinary gathering. It was an event of unparalleled significance, hosted by none other than Elias Moreau, the enigmatic billionaire scientist whose very name evoked admiration and mystery in equal measure. The guests were a carefully curated assembly of the world's finest minds, intellectuals, renowned scientists, celebrated artists, foreign dignitaries, and even members of royal families, all drawn here by Moreau's invitation. Each individual present was among the elite, the visionaries who had shaped human thought and progress. And yet, despite their collective brilliance, none of them knew what awaited them tonight. Moreau himself stood at the heart of it all, a striking figure of quiet confidence and undeniable authority. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that accentuated his lean frame, his dark eyes burned with a fierce intelligence, their depths hiding secrets beyond comprehension. He was a man who had spent years cultivating an aura of enigma, his discoveries and inventions pushing the boundaries of what humanity believed to be possible. And tonight, he was about to unveil something that would redefine reality itself. With a subtle yet commanding gesture, Moreau raised his hand, and the murmur of the crowd subsided. The music faded into silence, and all eyes turned toward him, anticipation thick in the air. He did not need to raise his voice to be heard. His presence alone demanded attention. "My friends," he began, his voice resonating with an almost hypnotic cadence, "tonight, I offer you a glimpse into the future, a future that will challenge everything you think you know. What I reveal to you now is not merely a scientific breakthrough. It is an awakening, a step toward understanding the very fabric of our existence. This is the dawn of a new age. A hush fell over the audience. There was something in Moreau's tone, something unshakably certain, that sent a shiver down the spine of even the most skeptical among them. The atmosphere in the room shifted, as though reality itself had paused, waiting for the revelation to come. I introduce to you, Moreau continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, Orpheus. At that moment a sound emerged, subtle at first, like the faint hum of a distant engine, barely perceptible yet undeniably present. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The guests exchanged uncertain glances, their senses straining to locate the source. And then the voice came. It was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a presence that sent ripples through the air. Orpheus, it said. Some gasped. Others stiffened, eyes widening as they glanced around the room, searching for a speaker, a hidden mechanism, anything that could explain what they were hearing. But there was nothing. No microphone, no hologram, no discernible source. And yet the voice was unmistakable, calm, measured, and impossibly intimate, as though it was speaking directly to their very souls. Professor Adrien Vasseur, a renowned symbologist known for his sharp mind and deep understanding of ancient mysteries, felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers of Moreau's work, speculation about artificial intelligence beyond anything known to man. But this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Moreau's expression remained composed, his satisfaction barely concealed. Orpheus is not a machine, he explained, his voice carrying across the room. It is not an algorithm, nor is it simply a program designed to answer questions. Orpheus is something else entirely. It is a consciousness, a presence that does not just process information but understands. It speaks to you not through speakers or devices, but directly into your mind. It does not simply provide knowledge, it interacts with your thoughts. The murmurs of disbelief were immediate. A few guests shook their heads, convinced this was an elaborate illusion. But then the voice returned, and this time it spoke directly to each individual, not in a collective address, but in a manner so personal, so attuned to their deepest thoughts, that it left them breathless. The truth is hidden in plain sight, Orpheus whispered. The answers you seek lie beyond the limits of perception. But first, you must be willing to open your mind. Celeste Durand, the museum curator, felt her breath hitch. The words had resonated with her in a way that defied logic. It was as if Orpheus knew what she had always longed to understand. She turned to Prince Alexander, standing beside her, but he too was transfixed, his normally composed expression betraying a hint of astonishment. What is this? Celeste whispered, her voice barely audible. Alexander did not immediately respond. His gaze remained fixed on Moreau, as though seeking answers in the man's unwavering confidence. And then Orpheus spoke again. You will soon understand, it said, its tone both soothing and foreboding. The revolution that is about to unfold will change everything. The truth I reveal will rewrite the very fabric of history. It will reshape what you know about life, creation, and humanity itself. But before you proceed, ask yourselves this: what is more important, what you believe or what is true? The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. A strange energy coursed through the room, an unspoken tension gripping each person present. The implications were staggering. This was no mere artificial intelligence. This was something else, something that defied the boundaries of human understanding. Moreau took a step forward, his voice breaking the silence. In 3 days I will unveil the full truth. Until then, Orpheus will remain with you, speaking to you, guiding your thoughts. It will take you on a journey unlike any you have ever known. And when the time comes, you will stand at the precipice of revelation. With that, Orpheus's voice faded, leaving only the hushed whispers of a shaken crowd. Some remained frozen in place, trying to process what had just occurred, while others turned to one another, their faces pale with disbelief. Professor Vasseur, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally stepped forward. "This is dangerous, Elias," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and concern. "You have created something that no one can control." Moreau met his gaze without hesitation. "It is not about control, Adrien. It is about discovery. Orpheus does not dictate, it reveals. And the truth, once seen, cannot be ignored." Vasseur's frown deepened. "But what if the truth is something we were never meant to find?" Moreau did not answer. He merely offered a knowing smile before turning his attention to the next guest. The night was far from over, and the path ahead was one of no return. The world as they knew it was on the verge of a transformation beyond imagination. And soon, Orpheus would lead them to the precipice of a revelation that could change humanity forever. As the evening drew to a close, the guests departed, their minds burdened with questions they could not yet articulate. But one thought remained, echoing in the depths of their consciousness. What was the truth? And were they ready to face it? Chapter 3: The Assassination. The anticipation in the grand auditorium was electric, a charged atmosphere of curiosity and expectation. The vast hall, filled with intellectuals, dignitaries, and journalists from around the globe, sat in hushed silence, all eyes locked onto the imposing stage where Elias Moreau stood beneath a dazzling cascade of golden lights. This was no ordinary presentation. It was the moment that promised to alter the course of history. Millions of viewers tuned in from their screens, awaiting the revelation that Moreau had promised would redefine human understanding. Standing tall, Moreau exuded an aura of quiet confidence, his tailored dark suit impeccable, his piercing eyes scanning the audience. Behind him, a massive screen illuminated with the enigmatic symbol of Orpheus, its intricate design pulsating like a living entity. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself before speaking into the microphone attached to his lapel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice a measured blend of authority and reverence, "tonight, I unveil something that will transform the very fabric of our existence. We stand on the precipice of a new dawn, a moment that will redefine human consciousness and reality itself. What you are about to witness is not just a scientific breakthrough, it is an evolution of the mind." The audience leaned forward in anticipation, their breaths collectively held. Unbeknownst to them, a figure lurked in the dimly lit upper balcony, concealed by the shadows. Dressed entirely in black, his face obscured by a mask, Jean-Luc Roussel moved with the precision of a specter. A ghost in the clandestine world of espionage, he was known only through whispers. He methodically adjusted his sniper rifle, its silencer ensuring that his work would be swift and undetectable. His target, Elias Moreau. Moreau continued, his voice rich with conviction, unaware of the lethal gaze trained upon him. "We have long sought to understand the depths of human potential, the mysteries that lie beyond perception. Tonight, I give you Orpheus." The auditorium erupted into murmurs. The tension in the air was palpable. And then? A single shot. A muted crack, almost indistinguishable amid the vastness of the hall, yet its effect was immediate. Moreau staggered. A dark crimson stain blossomed across his chest, spreading like ink on parchment. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a second of eerie silence before it shattered into chaos. Screams echoed through the hall as people rose from their seats in panic, knocking over chairs in their frantic bid for safety. Moreau stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock, his hands trembling as they pressed against his wound, fingers stained with his own blood. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the polished stage, his vision darkening as he gasped for breath. Pandemonium erupted. Security personnel stormed the balconies, their weapons drawn, but Roussel was already gone, melting into the darkness like a phantom. Guests trampled over one another in their desperation to flee. Some journalists remained rooted in place, their instincts forcing them to capture the unfolding horror, their cameras flashing incessantly. But the terror of the night did not end there. Across the city, horror unfolded in synchronized precision. In the solemn quiet of the Grand Synagogue of Paris, Rabbi Yitzhak Levy sat in his study, immersed in the sacred text of the Torah. The candlelight flickered against the ancient parchment, casting dancing shadows upon the walls. A knock at the door broke the serene silence. He barely had time to react before a blade flashed through the dim light, slicing through his throat with surgical precision. His body slumped over the sacred scripture, blood seeping into the delicate pages, staining them irreparably. At the same moment, in the hallowed halls of the Al-Farouk Mosque, Imam Abdul al-Farouk knelt in quiet devotion, his whispered prayers a harmony of faith and peace. The soft shuffle of footsteps behind him was his only warning. A single silenced gunshot echoed through the sacred space. The Imam fell forward, his lifeless body resting upon the prayer rug, the echoes of his final prayer lingering in the still air. Paris was plunged into chaos. Sirens wailed across the cityscape as emergency services rushed to the scenes. News stations scrambled to piece together the horrifying puzzle. 3 assassinations, executed with chilling precision, carried out in the span of mere minutes. The world watched in horror as speculation ran rampant. Was this an act of terrorism? A political maneuver? Or something far darker, something orchestrated with a purpose beyond comprehension? Back at the auditorium, Celeste Durand crouched behind an overturned chair, her body trembling as her mind struggled to process what had just transpired. Beside her, Professor Adrien Vasseur sat frozen, his face drained of color. Moreau was dead. The man who had promised to unveil the truth of Orpheus had been silenced before he could reveal its mysteries. Security forces barked orders, trying to regain control over the frenzied crowd. Guests were ushered toward emergency exits, their faces etched with disbelief and terror. A ripple of dread passed through the hall as the massive screen behind the fallen Moreau flickered back to life. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike any human sound. Deep, mechanical, and devoid of emotion, it sent chills through the spines of everyone present. The truth cannot be silenced. The path has been chosen. The world will change. The voice of Orpheus. A collective shudder ran through the auditorium. Was this part of Moreau's plan? Or had someone, taken control of his creation? Had Orpheus itself spoken these words, or was it merely an echo of its creator's vision? Outside, the streets of Paris boiled with unrest. Protesters clashed with riot police, conspiracy theorists flooded social media with wild speculations, and political leaders scrambled to issue statements condemning the attacks. But amidst the noise, one truth remained starkly clear: someone had orchestrated this night with chilling precision. Jean-Luc Roussel moved through the labyrinthine alleyways of Paris, his pulse steady despite the carnage he had just unleashed. He had fulfilled his mission, but he knew this was only the beginning. He was but a pawn in a game far greater than himself, a game whose players lurked in the unseen corridors of power. And the world had yet to realize that the true reckoning was still to come. Chapter 4: The Escape. Paris had always been a city of elegance, culture, and romance. A place where history and modernity intertwined seamlessly, creating a backdrop for some of the most defining moments of human civilization. But tonight, the city was shrouded in chaos. The assassination of Elias Moreau, a figure whose influence stretched beyond the borders of France, had shaken the world to its very core. As his body lay lifeless on the stage of the Grand Auditorium, the reverberations of his death spread like a storm, not just across Paris, but across the globe. News channels played the footage over and over, dissecting every frame of the tragedy, speculating endlessly on the motives behind such an audacious act. The brutal precision of the killings, Moreau at the Grand Auditorium, Rabbi Yitzhak Levy at the Grand Synagogue, and Imam Abdul al-Farouk at the mosque, executed with the kind of cold calculation that left no room for doubt. All 3 murders occurred within the span of a single hour, a fact that left the world reeling. How could such a coordinated attack happen so swiftly? Who could have orchestrated such a thing? These were questions that echoed in every corner of the globe, from the darkest alleys to the grandest boardrooms. The victims represented a cross-section of society, religious, political, and intellectual, leading many to wonder if this was the beginning of a larger, more sinister plan. In the immediate aftermath of Moreau's assassination, French intelligence had sprung into action. As the professor's lifeless body crumpled to the stage floor, an emergency response was triggered. Sirens filled the air, their wails cutting through the cold night like a warning. Police set up barricades, locking down key areas of the city in a desperate attempt to control the situation. The streets were flooded with officers, while surveillance footage from every corner was painstakingly analyzed. But despite the relentless efforts of the authorities, they were left with more questions than answers. The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit, and the motive behind the murders seemed elusive, like a shadow that vanished when you tried to focus on it. Meanwhile, in the midst of the growing turmoil, two figures found themselves caught in the crosshairs of a dangerous and relentless game. Professor Adrien Vasseur, an intellectual whose expertise in the mysteries of the human mind had once made him a respected figure in academic circles, was now a fugitive. His companion, Celeste Durand, was a woman of exceptional intellect and unyielding determination. Together, they had been thrust into a situation that neither of them could have ever predicted. As the city around them descended into chaos, they found themselves on the run, their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The narrow alleyways of Paris, once a place of quiet reflection and secret rendezvous, had transformed into a perilous maze. As Vasseur and Celeste sprinted through the dimly lit streets, their breath coming in ragged gasps, the weight of their reality pressed heavily on their shoulders. The familiar city had become a labyrinth of danger, and every corner seemed to conceal a threat. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the damp cobblestones, a constant reminder that they were being pursued. How did they know? Celeste gasped, her voice tinged with disbelief. She cast a fearful glance over her shoulder, as though expecting to see someone close behind them. How did they know exactly where to hit? Vasseur didn't answer immediately. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Every instinct screamed at him to focus, to keep moving. He was a man of reason, a man who had spent his life searching for logical explanations to the mysteries of the world. But tonight, logic had failed him. The world seemed to have unraveled in an instant, and now all he could do was react. The Paris he knew, the city that had been his home for decades, had become a hunting ground. And they, it seemed, were the prey. Before he could formulate a response, a voice crackled in his earpiece, calm and unnervingly smooth, like a whisper in the dark. "Turn left," the voice instructed. Without hesitation, Vasseur obeyed, pulling Celeste along with him as they veered sharply into another alley. The narrow passageway swallowed them whole, obscuring their figures from the view of anyone who might be watching. The moment they disappeared from sight, a black SUV screeched to a halt on the road they had just vacated. The vehicle's tires squealed against the pavement, its arrival a sign that they were being hunted. Men in tactical gear poured out of the SUV, their movements precise and practiced. They scanned the area with cold, calculating eyes, their rifles raised and ready. Celeste swallowed hard, the weight of the situation finally hitting her. "They're hunting us," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might draw attention to their hiding place. "Yes," the voice in the earpiece responded, its tone devoid of emotion. "You are now targets." Vasseur's mind raced. Who are they? The response was as detached and cryptic as ever. "That information is not yet available to you." Celeste let out a nervous laugh, her fear manifesting as sarcasm. "Not available? You're the most advanced intelligence in the world, and that's all you can say?" "Correct." There was a brief moment of silence. Vasseur tightened his grip on Celeste's hand, pulling her further into the shadows. They had no time to argue. In the face of such overwhelming danger, survival was their only priority. And with that they moved forward, deeper into the labyrinth of Parisian streets, where every turn felt like a step closer to the unknown. Somewhere beneath the bustling streets of Paris, a hidden world awaited. A network of tunnels, older than the city itself, stretched for miles beneath the surface. The catacombs, a vast labyrinth of stone and bone, had been there long before the modern city had risen above them. And now, in their moment of desperation, these tunnels offered the only hope of escape. Orpheus, the voice that had guided them so far, led them to a discreet entrance near an abandoned metro station. Vasseur hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the darkness that lay beyond the threshold. The scent of damp earth and ancient stone filled his nostrils, a stark reminder that they were about to descend into the unknown. "We don't have a choice," Celeste murmured, her voice steady despite the fear that clung to her words. "If we stay up here, they'll find us." Vasseur nodded grimly. With a final glance at the chaotic streets above, he stepped into the darkness. The tunnels closed around them, swallowing them whole, leaving behind the city of light, and plunging them into a world where only the echoes of their footsteps and the faint hum of Orpheus's voice could guide them. Elsewhere, another player in this dangerous game was being moved like a pawn on a chessboard. Prince Alexander, who had barely processed the shocking news of Moreau's death, found himself in the hands of Cardinal Renaud. The cardinal's grip on his arm was firm, and the urgency in his eyes was impossible to ignore. "Come with me," the cardinal ordered, his voice low and commanding. Alexander, still reeling from the events of the evening, hesitated. "Where?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "Somewhere safe." "Now?" The cardinal's tone left no room for argument. As security forces swarmed the scene and guests were ushered away in waves, Renaud led the prince through a side exit, down a rarely used corridor that seemed to be reserved only for staff. There were no cameras here, no prying eyes. It was as if the cardinal had anticipated the need for a quick escape. And now, with Alexander by his side, the two of them moved through the building with a sense of purpose. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Why help me?" Renaud didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a code into a discreet panel on the wall. The panel slid open, revealing a dark tunnel that stretched into the unknown. "Because," the cardinal said, stepping inside, "you are not just any prince, Alexander. And tonight's events are far from random." Alexander followed, his mind racing as he wondered what forces were at play. He felt the weight of unseen hands closing in around him, pulling him deeper into a game he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, above ground, the turmoil in Paris continued unabated. News broadcasts played relentlessly, speculating on the meaning of the murders, on the larger conspiracy that seemed to be unfolding. Paris, once a beacon of light and hope, had been plunged into darkness, both literally and figuratively. Beneath the streets, Vasseur and Celeste pressed on, guided by the voice of Orpheus, a presence that was both comforting and unsettling in its detachment. In the hidden sanctuaries of the powerful, Prince Alexander sat across from Cardinal Renaud, his fate now tied to forces far beyond his control. The game had begun, and for those caught in its web, there would be no turning back. Chapter 5: The Hidden Man. The morning in Paris was thick with fog, an eerie silence lingering in the cool, damp air. A strange unease hung over the city, settling like a heavy mist that refused to lift. In the winding streets on the outskirts of the city, intelligence operatives moved like shadows, their every step calculated, their senses alert. They had received a critical piece of information, word from an informant about a shadowy figure who had been living under a false identity. This man had been off the grid for years, avoiding all digital traces, and his involvement in the events that had plunged France into chaos was more than a mere suspicion. The directive was clear: find him, apprehend him, and uncover the secrets he held. The convoy of unmarked black vehicles glided to a stop outside an old chateau, a weathered structure whose ivy-clad walls seemed to hold the secrets of centuries. The chateau stood as a quiet witness to a bygone era, its beauty shrouded in mystery. A team of operatives, clad in sleek tactical gear and armed with an array of high-tech weaponry, disembarked swiftly. Their breaths were shallow and their movements fluid, each person a cog in the precision machine that had been sent to track down a ghost. The commanding officer's signal was sharp, and within moments, 2 operatives breached the front door of the chateau. The echo of their boots reverberated through the cold, dimly lit foyer as their rifles swept across the room, seeking any threat. The scent of old books and burning incense filled the air, mixing with something else, something familiar yet hauntingly distant, like the faint memory of a melody lost to time. Inside the study, was a picture of deliberate disarray. Bookshelves, cluttered with ancient tomes and relics, lined the walls. In the center of the room sat a man, draped in a traditional jalaba, a prayer cap resting atop his head. His posture was relaxed, as though he had been expecting them, even though they had arrived without warning. The lead investigator's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat as recognition struck him like a thunderclap. Impossible. It couldn't be. The world had mourned his death years ago. And yet, the man sitting before them was undeniably real, unmistakable. The man's eyes, calm and reflective, met the investigators'. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of his lips. "I was wondering when you would come," he said softly, his voice a low whisper carrying with it the weight of history and regret. The room fell silent, each agent frozen in disbelief as they took in the man before them. The operative in charge, his voice tight with confusion and awe, finally spoke. "You're supposed to be dead." The man exhaled a soft breath, the lines on his face deepening with an emotion too complex to name. His eyes seemed to flicker for a moment, as though revisiting a pain buried long ago. "Death," he murmured, "is sometimes a necessity to truly live." A shudder ran through the room, the tension thickening like smoke. One of the agents stepped forward, his voice still sharp with suspicion. "What's your name?" The man straightened his back, his hands resting gently on his lap. "Mikhail ibn Malek," he said, his voice calm and steady. The name was foreign to the agents, unfamiliar in every sense. But the man wearing it was not. This was a name from another life, one long buried, one that the world had thought was gone. The investigators exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, his voice barely a whisper, muttered, "Michael Jackson?" Mikhail nodded slowly, the faintest of smiles touching his lips. "That name," he said, "is from another life. A life of illusions, manipulation, and suffering." His fingers swept toward the cluttered desk in front of him, motioning toward the scattered papers and artifacts. "Please sit. There is much to discuss." The commanding officer's jaw clenched, but he refused the invitation. "You faked your death?" Mikhail chuckled softly, the sound tinged with sorrow. "The world needed me to be gone," he said, his tone thoughtful, as though speaking of a distant past. "And I needed to find the truth." The agents stood frozen, the weight of the man's words pressing down on them. A legend that had died in 2009, now sitting before them, alive, real, and more enigmatic than ever. The theories surrounding his death had been rampant, ranging from conspiracies to simple rumors, but none of them had prepared them for this. His survival wasn't just a trick or an illusion. It was a complete reinvention of the man they thought they knew. A young operative, still gripping his weapon with white-knuckled intensity, spoke up, his voice tight with incredulity. "And what truth did you find?" Mikhail's eyes grew darker, his gaze unfocused as he seemed to lose himself in a distant memory. "That the world is not what it seems," he said, his voice heavy with a quiet wisdom. "That there are forces beyond governments, beyond kings and queens, forces that decide the course of history before we ever live it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I walked away to escape them. But now, they are closing in again." The lead investigator leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite his skepticism. "You're saying this has to do with Orpheus?" Mikhail's eyes met his, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. "Orpheus," he said slowly, "is only a piece of a much larger puzzle." His voice grew more intense. "Moreau's death, the assassinations, the unrest, these are symptoms of a deeper sickness. A war that has raged in the shadows for centuries." The agents exchanged looks, their minds struggling to comprehend the enormity of what Mikhail was suggesting. The world they thought they knew was being unraveled before them, piece by piece. A war fought in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the public, where the forces shaping history were far more powerful than any government or ruler. The commanding officer, ever the skeptic, pressed on, his voice hard with suspicion. "Why should we believe you?" Mikhail's expression remained calm, his demeanor unshaken. "Because you wouldn't be here if you didn't already suspect the truth," he said, his voice steady, but with an edge that was unmistakable. "And because they are watching. Even now." Before any of the agents could respond, a sudden burst of static crackled through their earpieces, the familiar hum of secure communications faltering into chaos. Their encrypted radios, usually impervious to outside interference, were being jammed. Outside, the distant sound of tires screeching against the wet asphalt cut through the silence of the chateau, a sharp warning that the calm had ended. Mikhail's eyes flickered toward the window, and his body tensed, his features hardening as he recognized the sound. "They found me," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. The agents sprang into action, their training kicking in, as they pivoted toward the entrance, their weapons drawn and ready. The once peaceful solitude of the chateau had been shattered. Shadows moved in the fog outside, and figures in black emerged from the mist, moving with a coordinated precision that spoke of years of preparation. The operatives braced themselves for what was coming. "Who are they?" one of the agents asked urgently, his voice laced with fear and confusion. Mikhail inhaled deeply, the calmness in his voice belying the tension in the air. "The ones who never wanted me to speak." Before any further words could be exchanged, gunfire erupted from outside. The agents ducked for cover, their rifles raised in anticipation. The battle for the truth had begun. In the shadows of history, forces beyond their comprehension were converging. Mikhail ibn Malek, the man who had vanished years ago, was at the center of it all. The game was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a battle for the very narrative of the world itself. Chapter 6: The Last King of Pop. The dim glow of candlelight flickered across the ancient stone walls of the secluded study. The room was tucked away from the world, hidden in the deep recesses of an old building that seemed to have witnessed centuries of change, yet remained unchanged in its solemn silence. Dust particles danced lazily in the air, illuminated by the soft flicker of the flames, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. On a massive old wooden desk that looked as though it had seen 1,000 years of history, a variety of scrolls, leather-bound tomes, and religious manuscripts were scattered, their edges worn and their spines cracked with age. The shelves that lined the walls were filled with books in languages long forgotten, relics of civilizations that had passed into the annals of time. In the midst of this ancient library sat Mikhail ibn Malek, once known to the world as Michael Jackson. His transformation from a global pop icon to a scholar of secret religious texts was as unbelievable as it was extraordinary. Here he sat, draped in modest, humble attire, a traditional jalaba with a prayer cap resting atop his head. His once radiant and recognizable features, which had graced countless covers and screens across the globe, were now shrouded in a tranquility that had escaped him in his past life. His eyes, however, still held the same intense, mesmerizing gaze, one that seemed to hold the weight of countless experiences, both public and private. It was a gaze that had seen the heights of fame and the depths of secrecy, a gaze that had borne witness to the birth of legends and the quiet dissolution of those very same legends. As the candlelight flickered in the dim room, Mikhail sat in quiet contemplation, his fingers tracing the delicate calligraphy of an aged parchment. The words were in a script that looked ancient, and yet somehow it seemed as though the ink had only just dried. His mind was far from the glitzy world of music videos and sold-out stadiums. Instead, it was immersed in the deep, enigmatic world of hidden knowledge, religious texts, and conspiracies stretching back centuries. It was almost as though the music had been nothing more than a dream, a fleeting moment in time that had long passed. Vasseur and Celeste, still reeling from the chaos they had narrowly escaped, sat across from him. Their clothes were still damp from their harried escape, their faces pale from the shock of the night's events. The air inside the chamber was thick with the scent of old paper, incense, and something indefinably ancient, like the very room itself was alive with history and secrets. Despite the urgency of the moment, Mikhail moved with a serene grace, as if he were untouchable, untouched by the storms that raged outside or the chaos they had just narrowly escaped. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and purposeful, as though he had learned to master both his surroundings and himself. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of silence, Mikhail looked up from the parchment. His dark eyes, reflecting both wisdom and sorrow, met Vasseur's and Celeste's with a depth that suggested he had already seen this moment coming long before they had arrived. The calm that surrounded him was almost otherworldly, a stark contrast to the frenzy that had accompanied their flight from the dangers they had narrowly avoided. His voice, when it came, was measured, each syllable heavy with meaning, as though he was not simply speaking to them but to all of history. "You seek the truth about the assassinations," he said, his voice calm yet imbued with a quiet authority. "But the truth is far more dangerous than you imagine. The death of Moreau, the killings of Rabbi Levi and Imam al-Farouk, they were not isolated acts of terror. They were orchestrated, part of a grand design centuries in the making." Vasseur leaned forward, his brow furrowed in skepticism and intrigue, the wheels of his mind turning rapidly as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of what Mikhail was suggesting. By whom? Who stands to gain from these murders? His voice was sharp, as though he could hardly believe what was being proposed. He had seen conspiracy theories come and go, but this was something different. Something far darker. Mikhail sighed softly, running a hand over his face, as though the weight of the world itself pressed down on him. His eyes seemed to darken as he gathered his thoughts. "The Brotherhood of Saint Remy," he said at last. "A rogue sect within the Catholic Church, older than even the Jesuits, more elusive than the Templars. They exist in the shadows, manipulating events, ensuring that power remains in the hands of those they deem worthy." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The Brotherhood of Saint Remy? Vasseur had never heard of such a group, but the way Mikhail spoke of them, so assuredly, so unflinchingly, suggested they were far from a mere myth or forgotten legend. They were real, and their reach extended far beyond what the world knew. Celeste, who had been quietly listening, her mind racing to make sense of everything, could no longer contain her disbelief. "The Catholic Church sanctioned Moreau's murder?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and confusion. Mikhail shook his head, the gesture slow and deliberate. "Not the Church as a whole," he replied, his voice tinged with a quiet sadness. "No pope has ever openly acknowledged their existence, but they have always been there, lurking beneath the surface of history. They believe they are the guardians of a divine order, that they alone have the right to dictate the fate of mankind. And they saw Moreau as a threat." He gestured toward a small stack of papers on the desk, filled with symbols and markings that Celeste did not recognize. The pages were dense with esoteric knowledge, their contents cryptic and enigmatic. Mikhail's fingers brushed over the stack of papers, almost reverentially. Moreau's research threatened to unveil something they were not ready to let the world see. Something about the fundamental nature of existence itself. Vasseur's mind raced. He could hardly keep up with the revelations being thrown at him. Then Moreau's murder wasn't just political or religious, it was about knowledge? His voice was tinged with realization. If Mikhail was right, then the stakes of what they were dealing with were far greater than any of them had imagined. Mikhail nodded gravely, his gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the walls of the room. Knowledge that could undermine the entire framework of power as they know it. "And there is more," he continued, pausing for a moment as though he was gathering the courage to reveal the next part of the story. "The French monarchy. It may not be as dead as history would have you believe." Celeste's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're saying there are still royalists with real power in France?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mixture of awe and confusion. Mikhail gave her a knowing smile, one that spoke of hidden truths and secrets long buried. "Not just royalists. A bloodline. A living descendant of the Bourbon kings. A rightful heir. And the Brotherhood of Saint Remy may be working to restore the monarchy. Or at the very least, use it as a puppet." The room fell into an eerie silence. The weight of Mikhail's words seemed to hang in the air, pressing down on them all. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows, as if the very fabric of history was whispering its secrets through the night. Vasseur was the first to break the silence, his voice low and grim. "If that's true, then we're not just dealing with an assassination plot. We're witnessing the first steps of a coup." Mikhail nodded once more, his expression unreadable. "And if you want to survive, you must tread carefully. Because now that you know this much, they will come for you too." Celeste swallowed hard, the enormity of their situation crashing down on her like a wave. She could feel the weight of the danger surrounding them, pressing in on all sides. Then we have no choice. We have to uncover the truth before it's too late. Mikhail watched them for a long moment, his dark eyes searching theirs, as if measuring the depth of their resolve. Then, without a word, he reached for a leather-bound book that sat on a shelf near him. He slid it across the table to them, the ancient book resting before them like a final key. "Then this must be your next step," he said quietly. "Inside, you will find names, dates, and locations that will lead you closer to the heart of the conspiracy. But be warned, once you set foot on this path, there is no turning back." Vasseur took the book, his hand steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. He looked at Celeste, then back at Mikhail. "Then let's get started." And with that, the last king of pop sent them on a journey that could shake the foundations of the world itself.